What's up, everyone? It's Dave from the Medal of Honor channel. I'm finally getting around to doing the next episode of Honored Metal. It was supposed to be done in January, and unfortunately the album took a little bit longer to get here, and I had other projects that also kind of distracted me a bit. So anyway, we're back to it finally here, and we are going to be talking about Pantera, the 20th anniversary of their final album, Reinventing the Steel. Really nice looking cover to this, by the way. As you can see, it's got the nice embossed look on that steel grate there. Really pretty album. We'll get into it a little bit more here in just a moment. The thing with Pantera is that Pantera is one of those bands who reached a level of success that automatically just causes them to get people who hate them for that. As metal fans, we do tend to grasp bands that can be a little bit more on the obscure side of things sometimes, and they're, obviously we kind of avoid things that we consider mainstream, but really that should only be because mainstream stuff is just kind of typical, and it's not as creative. It should really be about what touches you when it comes to music, what you love, and the idea of enjoying a band and then not enjoying them simply because they found success, which is what every band wants to do. It's kind of insane to me to think that now I don't like you. So I like what I like regardless of what the crowd thinks. If they sell 100 albums, if they sell 1,000,000 albums, doesn't matter as long as I like it. So Pantera is one of those bands who just seemed like they were champions of this kind of new underground kind of metal that was up and coming, and they really changed about the way heavy metal appeared and the way it sounded. And it was a great thing for music, especially in the music industry, as far as other heavy metal bands go, because you got to remember that people aren't buying it, the record labels don't carry it, and that can go with all kinds of music. So when we saw in the early 90s this trend of heavy metal kind of dying off, and labels were dropping bands left and right and stuff, bands like Pantera are actually what helped keep a lot of other bands doing well and being successful and being able to keep promoting themselves for you to hear. That can be any kind of hard rock bands to the most extreme death metal bands can be thankful that they still have a platform thanks to bands who are successful. So, and the great thing about Pantera was they continued to do it their own way. Yeah, Dimebag Darrell, of course, was just the most legendary guitar player. He was just incredibly talented, and he definitely earned the titles and the recognition that he got for that. So I think Pantera is a band that absolutely 100% deserves more attention. So why not? Let's get into this a little bit more here. Now, we do think of Pantera as a 90s band, and I mean, really, essentially, that's what they are. They definitely were, for people who were into that kind of music. I've kind of talked about it before, about how Pantera is one of the bands that kept metal alive through the 90s. And I think for maybe the generation behind me who really, saw Pantera as their champion, is probably a good thing that they didn't see that Pantera actually was around in the 80s. They just, weren't really that well known, and they kind of, were trying things that it's understandable. All bands tried things in the 80s like Hairspray and spandex. I mean, hell, Iron Maiden wore spandex. I think they still do. So anyway, it's not surprising that bands like Pantera come up. Pantera actually formed in 1981 when they were just kids in Arlington, Texas, and they, for that first almost decade, pretty much just stuck around there, playing, huge parties. They were really well known all over Fort Worth and Dallas area. But they were just kids, and they were up and coming, and they were trying their thing, and they were trying to fit in, and so, they made their attempts at, looking like other bands and, even at times sounding like other bands. But fortunately for us, they found their own look and their own voice, and they realized that it really wasn't about that kind of stuff. And that's one of the reasons they were able to propel themselves through the 90s so well. So as people maybe thought that they were just a band that came out in 1990, no. Actually, they were around for... That was actually their first album that we know of well was Cowboys from Hell, and that was 1990. That was actually their 5th album, as crazy as that seems. So, but it was also their first major release, and came on strong. I mean, just the energy and the style that they put out, and even the look. Pantera kind of is the band probably most responsible for us having a subgenre called groove metal. They were just really good at giving a nice heavy swing to their music, even though they're also considered part of the second wave of thrash. They just kind of had this groove to their sound, and so from that, we kind of think of bands we consider groove metal, and it definitely fit their sound. That first major release, Cowboys from Hell in 1990, I mean, it had some amazing songs on it, from the title track Cowboys from Hell, Cemetery Gates, Domination, Psycho Holiday, and my personal favorite is Primal Concrete Sledge, which is a really brutal song, and yet it does have kind of a groove to it. It's really interesting way that they kind of put stuff together. So got a lot of people's attention, and then from there they just went out and they just kept working hard. They toured constantly. When they weren't touring, they were recording, and while they were doing both of those, they were constantly partying as well. 1992 they released Vulgar Display of Power, which is probably my favorite Pantera album as a whole, and that's probably the truth for a lot of people. Vulgar Display of Power kind of helped that evolution of guitar tones, just kind of give us this really big, massive, deep guitar tones that were unlike anything we've heard before. I have done a little bit of a commentary video on this before, and I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. We owe that debt to Motley Crue, and probably in particular to Bob Rock producing Dr. Feelgood and making those kind of guitar tones that we didn't have before. So, but Pantera kind of took that to a new level, and Vulgar Display of Power was just an awesome album. Still to this day, is one I just never get tired of listening to. Granted, a lot of us can get tired of hearing the song Walk because it was played so much, but that's because it was that good. It was a song that took, just a couple simple notes and a simple riff that kept repeating itself, but kind of added a groove to it, and it gave this sort of march feeling to it. It's one of those songs that people who don't know Pantera know that particular song. And that was probably the song that really started to propel their success, so much so that even though they continued to try and get heavier and more aggressive, Far Beyond Driven, their 1994 release, debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts. And I mean, they did still have that kind of groove feel in some of their stuff, like 5 Minutes Alone, but some of the most aggressive and fast music they'd played yet, such as Strength Beyond Strength and Slaughtered. I mean, these were like really aggressive, fast, in-your-face screaming kind of songs. A lot of their lyrics were very abrasive, and the fact that that debuted at #1, you could really see a change in the music scene. This is a time when, alternative was at a high, and here comes Pantera saying metal's not dead, we're still here and we're coming back. However, the success of these albums and the constant touring is probably what helped lead Phil Anselmo to his many addiction problems. The whole band really had a lot of addiction issues. It's probably more alcohol than any band should ever be allowed to consume. But Phil Anselmo, at this time, he really started to take a lot of painkillers, and then because of some back problems he was having, and from there, in order to numb the pain, and ended up getting hooked on heroin. this started to cause a real rift in the band, and when they recorded their 1996 album, The Great Southern Trendkill, they actually did it in 2 different locations. The band stayed at their studio in Texas, while Phil decided to do all of his vocal tracks in his home studio in Nowlands, Louisiana. He didn't want to go do the album with the band, so again, that just kind of further caused rifts. And again, the album was definitely getting even heavier than what they'd done before, but also took longer breaks. Phil started doing other projects with other bands. Phil at one point OD'd on heroin and had to be brought back to life, which did affect some of the lyrics for the last album, Reinventing the Steel. That was the longest break they had between albums, and this came out in 2000, Reinventing the Steel. And from there, that was it. The tour was great. Now I heard a lot of things about people saying different, seeing Phil laying on the floor singing and not putting his all into it, which I kind of get that from whether it be addiction to heroin or back pain. But I did see the tour myself on Ozfest, and Phil was great at that particular show. The whole band was quite impressive. Nevertheless, by that point, a lot of damage was done to the band, mostly just from Phil not only having his addiction issues, but wanting to do his own thing. And in 2003, the band split. Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul went on to start a new band called Damage Plan, which was actually a pretty cool band, and I was fortunate enough to see them live. However, they weren't around very long. One album put out, and it was a really good album. But they were at that back to the level of playing at clubs again, and then while they seemed to be having fun doing it, unfortunately and quite tragically, Dimebag Darrell was killed on stage on December 8th of 2004. They were playing at a club in Columbus, Ohio, and gunmen actually walked up on stage and killed him point blank. Just shook the music world. We've heard of musicians being killed before. This actually happened on stage while performing, very early on into the set. Just a shocking turn of events. So obviously, there was never anything else to be said about Pantera from there. Eventually, Vinnie went on to start a new band called Hell Yeah, which was a really cool band and did very well. And unfortunately, only a couple years ago, in 2018, Vinnie died from heart failure. So yeah, a lot of tragedy, a lot of incredible talent just gone. But let's get further into this album, Reinventing the Steel. This is the new album cover for the anniversary edition, the 2021 actual release. It was actually ready at the end of 2020 here, but yeah, so that's the reimagined cover, and you can see the photos of the band, and also, yeah, this is a 2-disc set. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, this was originally released March 26th of 2000 on Elektra Records. It was produced by the brothers Abbott. Vinnie and Dime at this point pretty much doing most of the work themselves when it comes to recording. It did reach number 4 on the Billboard charts. This is actually, though, the only Pantera album, well, since Cowboys from Hell, that did not go platinum. I'll show you the actual original cover here. This is the actual album art that went on there. The guy on the cover there, this is actually at Phil and Selma's house. The guys were having a big party / bonfire in the backyard, and one of their friends who was drinking a lot, they basically dared him, they kind of each tossed in a couple $100 to dare him to jump through the fire, and somebody sober took the photo. I believe it's actually a bottle of wild turkey that is blurred out on the cover there. Alright, so anyway, let's get into the original tracks. Now, this album here, this is a double LP, and the first LP actually is just the album as it was, except for, of course, it's been remixed in 2020 by Terry Date. And the second disc on here has bonus tracks, some covers, live stuff, so we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about track by track the main songs. Track number 1 is called Hellbound, and it really has to do with a theme that Pantera does a lot, especially in this album. It's kind of about going your own way and going against the grain, even if to others that seems like it's kind of dark. You're doing your thing, and you know they do mention Fort Worth, Texas in the song, Hellbound in Fort Worth, Texas. So anyway, yeah, it's definitely a good, powerful opener. Track number 2 is Goddamn Electric. This is a sort of a dedication to their fans, not only their fans, but fans of heavy metal. They actually take the time in the song to mention bands like Black Sabbath and Slayer, and in the song they kind of talk about how basically, again, it doesn't matter if other people don't understand it, you get it because you're metal fans, and you realize that the feeling of this is there's nothing like it. Cool thing about this particular song is the outro on it is played by Kerry King of Slayer, and apparently Slayer was on tour. I think they were playing at Ozfest actually. The guys in Pantera showed up and they had basically wheeled a stack of Marshalls into the dressing room and some recording gear. Kerry King came right off stage, walked into the back area, and plugged in the first thing that he played as far as the outro solo is what made it to the album. He played it, and apparently Dime said, "Stop right there, don't let him re-record it." So one shot, that's what you got. Kerry King, guest appearance on Goddamn Electric.
You walk through the world by yourself, you can't be protected. Your trust is in whiskey and weed and Slayer. It's goddamn electric. Don't fake your life. Inhale it. And then you know yourself. The chain is goddamn electric. Don't waste your time. Embrace it. And then you know yourself. The chain is goddamn electric. Will focus the mind time.
Track number 3 is Yesterday Don't Mean Shit. And the song's pretty much just has to do with exactly what it says, not dwelling on what happened to you yesterday, but always persevering and moving forward. Track number 4 is You've Got to Belong to It. Again, this is fan service. This is kind of saying if you're a true metal fan, you get what's going on here, and if you don't get it, then you probably never will. So again, just a little dedication to the fans. Track number 5 is Revolution Is My Name. This was a single and a great song. I do believe they had a video for it. It seems like they had like child actors who were playing all the band members as kids, sort of. Of course, they still had all the same facial hair and stuff. But yeah, Revolution Is My Name is basically, this is a song that's just saying that change is imminent, and the one thing that never changes is
Into the world war, the 70s, a breath after the war. That was confusing because of my age. Should my eyes open for tomorrow's games? I can't have the way I am. There's no trust and there's no end. What is my name? It will never change. So here it stays.
Track number 6 is my favorite song on the album. It's called Death Rattle Shakes. Now this actually probably is very influenced from Phil's near-death experience. But what I really like about this is if you happen to watch SpongeBob, the 2001 episode of SpongeBob, I believe it's called Pre-Hibernation Week, where it's basically Sandy Squirrel wants to do as much extreme shit as possible before going into hibernation, and every time they go and do some kind of crazy stunt, Pantera music is playing on it. So it's music from this song, but I love that the beginning of SpongeBob says with music by Pantera. Number 7 is called We'll Grind That X for a Long Time, and basically this is a song just kind of saying how, you know, other bands, they may sell out, but we're Pantera, we'll never do that. So they're kind of just saying that we're always going to stick to our guns, even though this is our last album together. You get the idea. Track number 8 is Uplift. What I gather from the lyrics is that it's kind of saying if I have to choose what religion would do to my mental state versus, say, what alcohol and drugs would do, I'd rather have drugs and alcohol. And that's kind of what I got from it anyway. Track number 9 is It Makes Them Disappear. Looks to be, it's actually not a whole lot of lyrics involved in this song, but it does look to be possibly about drug addiction, something that Phil should know quite a bit about. The last song on the album is called I'll Cast a Shadow, also a really cool song, and kind of Phil's way of saying Pantera is going to leave their mark, which obviously they did do. They left their mark on the music scene, and Dimebag's shadow will always remain.
The end will cross the line and sends a message. It won't please the naked eye. Without it there is no light to foretell, to blind you. The law, the clowns on and after still. When I die, I cast a shadow, and I'll rise. I cast a shadow. I'm leaving more eyes open. I close up both of mine.
The second album here has a lot of bonus stuff. Of course, it has a couple of songs that were intended for movie soundtracks that I believe they were used. Avoid the Light and Immortally Insane. Also has covers of Ted Nugent's Cat Scratch Fever and Black Sabbath's Hole in the Sky and Electric Funeral. And then it has a couple of the radio edits on here. Goddamn Electric, Revolution Is My Name, and I'll Cast a Shadow on here. This particular one is actually a German edition. You can see made in Germany there, and that's because why it has the silver variant. Now you can kind of see that little swirl effect in there, which Really interesting because it almost looks like liquid metal. Of course, that's the effect from pouring the vinyl. But anyway, both albums look like that. And it also comes with, you know, a picture of the band pretending they still like each other. And some additional notes here on the album as far as, you know, some of the little tricks about recording the album, the story of Kerry King, and even the story about his friend Dustin who jumped through the fire for the album cover. So definitely a album worth having on the collection, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, any Pantera is worth having in the collection. So anyway, that's going to be it for this episode of Honored Metal, and until next time, keep your horns up, keep the needle down.